If you can give our listeners and our viewers some examples of innovation mindsets, innovation behaviors. What do we mean when we say that? Do you have a few examples of those?
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about mindsets, it's very much what Tom said, right? Their attitudes, their ways in which they see the world. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. One of the mindsets that we find really crucial to innovation is around this notion of being problem obsessed, the problem obsessed mindset. And the individuals that embody this mindset are really the ones who are willing to challenge the status quo. They're the ones who look around the corners to see what's coming next. And they're really passionate about solving the problems of within the business, of their employees, of their customers. Another mindset is around what we refer to as the growth mindset. So these leaders that embody this particular mindset, they are really the ones who nurture ideas. Very much in the early stages of innovation, they look to see where this idea might go. So they very much have an expansive frame of mind. And as a result, they're also the leaders that support, to Tom's point earlier, the ones who support thoughtful risk-taking and experimentation with an eye on that growth, the growth potential of these ideas. And I'll mention a couple of behaviors as well that tie very nicely with these two mindsets. One is around the behavior of curiosity. So constantly asking why, wanting to know more, wanting to really delve into the pain points of customers and employees. So curiosity is a big one that we say drives innovation. And another one is adaptability. So the behavior of adaptability is around when we're able to pivot, when we can adapt to new situations and new information and data so that we're able to move nimbly and arrive at decisions and move processes and innovations further faster. So those are just a couple of examples.
Those are great ones. And Sumita, I want to tell you too, over the years, I've learned what those people physically look like who are problem obsessed and are curious. I'm going to tell you right now what these people look like. They have really big ears, they have really big eyes, and they have tiny little mouths because they're the good ones anyway, have tiny little mouths because they're able to watch, observe, and listen very well.
Love that. I thought you were just painting a picture of an alien over there. I loved that the definitions and the examples over there that you gave of the mindsets and the behaviors. Tom, over the years, through your teaching, your experience, your consulting, can you give us examples of a few pace setters? Maybe some companies, maybe some. Tom, over the years of having taught and consulted, can you share with us a few examples of pace setters and what you have seen them do differently, other than, of course, the big ears, small, the focused eyes, and the small mouths?
I'll give you a couple of examples. One that we made reference to in our research is Google. And what I find so compelling about Google is, and this is how I define it, not how they define it, but they believe in creating a culture and a mindset where you start lots of little tiny fires and see which of those fires will grow and expand, and they are totally okay with failure, accepting smart failure too. So it's a culture and it's a mindset that really recognizes the benefit of going after lots of different types of segments. I mean, Google Glass, one would say, was a failure, but oh my gosh, the number of successes that they've had and will continue to have is amazing. Two, I'd contend a nonprofit organization like the YWCA that Doreen McWhorter, who was the CEO of, and now she's the CEO of the YMCA, but she created a mindset within that nonprofit that really provided people with the mindset of possibilities. In fact, she even had one of her key senior leaders' title was the Chief Possibility Officer.
Love that. Love that. That's fantastic. Sumita, anything else you'd like to add there in terms of examples of pace setters? I know you've been working with quite a few of them lately.
Yeah, definitely love the Google example, Tom. I'll add one more. Pfizer is a company, of course, very much in the news right now with its involvement in the COVID-19 vaccine, but it really started on this journey of innovation even earlier. It instituted, for example, and our research talks about this, it instituted a program known as Dare to Try. And even that title, quite purposeful, as you can imagine, in an organization, in a company, in a field where risk-taking is certainly perceived as not necessarily the right thing to do within pharma. The company wanted to get its people to really think differently, think boldly, and try new things. So this program was a training program around innovation, processes, tools, and behaviors and mindsets that was taken to almost 100,000 executives globally at Pfizer. And as a result of this program, their leaders, their people got excited about the possibilities of innovation and led to almost 250 business proposals for new innovations that were funded the following year. Ideas that would probably have never seen the light of day without this kind of approach. And as a result of this program, there was a real focus on innovation, but also a consistent approach and to thinking about innovation and building in and embedding those behaviors. Again, a great example of a pace setter who really took a focused approach to innovation, but equally, back to Tom's definition of innovation, saw impact from that as well.
Love that example. Fantastic. So we talked about what are some of the challenges in building a sustained culture of innovation. We also talked about what pace setters are doing right. And we brought it to life with a few examples. But where should companies start? What are the first steps that executives need to take in order to build a sustained culture of innovation? What are your thoughts there?
I can start. I think companies really need to start from the top. Tom mentioned this earlier. The leaders need to enable innovation to happen. And that means leaders need to be very consistent in their voice, painting a vision of what innovation means and can deliver for the organization. Equally important, along with top leadership, is addressing what we refer to as the frozen middle. So those people leaders who are in the trenches, who influence the everyday employees, bringing them on board as well, ensuring that they too embrace a culture of innovation with those same mindsets and behaviors. And then I would say the other aspect is something that we talked about earlier, which is making those behaviors really practical, very much easily adoptable in the day-to-day business practices of these leaders. And then experimentation, certainly a cornerstone of innovation, but leveraging experimentation so that leaders can try on new behaviors, see the proof points themselves, see the value and the impact of those new behaviors, and over time build belief so that they actually begin to embrace and embed the behaviors in their day-to-day. And the last thing I'll mention is organizations that build this kind of new culture also are really good about telling stories around it. So sharing the success stories, talking about how people have tried on new behaviors or changed things within the system. And it almost builds upon itself, right? People begin to get excited and more people come on board. So just a few thoughts around what organizations can very practically do to get this notion of culture started in their organizations.
I love that answer, Sumita, a lot. And let me just add a couple of other dimensions to that wonderful framework that you laid out. There'd be two.
Yeah.
How are we going to measure innovation success? And how are we going to reward and recognize the people within our organization that have done that, because that's one of the areas, actually both those areas. How do we measure it and how do we reward it? That I think is really important for building that innovation culture and mindset. And again, another book reference, one that we wrote in 2018 called Lifting People Up, The Power of Recognition. Lifting people up is all about the importance of giving praise and recognition in a variety of different types to people within an organization. And as soon as we hear we pay people, we give them their salary and their bonus, right? No, innovation really does require more of an entrepreneurial mindset. And so how can we give people not only financial rewards, but non-financial rewards that really will help support that type of culture? And then importantly too, how are we going to measure it? Not just in terms of revenues and bottom line profits, but in terms of the quality of the innovations that our customers perceive and or our employees perceive, and the extent to which we're managing innovation as a process.
If there were two things, maybe one or two things, no? So Tom and Sumita, this has been a great discussion. Really enjoyed co-authoring this piece of research, diving into the analysis with each of you. Now, if there were only one or two things that you would like our listeners, our viewers, to remember or take away from this conversation, what would that be? And Tom, maybe we'd start with you.
As it relates to our research and that article, Shivani, which I also loved doing that with both of you, for sure, it's now we have quantitative that culture mindset drives innovation success, not just structures and processes. So for me, that's the fundamental big takeaway. The other would be that CEOs and C-level executives need to behave better as it relates to innovation. And they need to put the T at both the beginning and the end of RUS, and they need to trust to a much greater extent that their innovation teams, if given the right direction, the right criteria for success, and the right resources, to trust that they will indeed generate successful solutions that will create value for their customers.
I guess I would completely agree, Tom, with what you said, and I'll add a couple of more from my perspective. I think for companies, for organizations, for leaders, recognizing that to really embed a culture of innovation, not only do you want to focus on top leadership, but don't forget the people leaders. Your folks in the trenches who are day in and day out working and leading your teams, make sure that you're really reaching out to them and getting them to embrace this culture as well. And the second point I'd say, in order to do that, in order to create this culture of experimentation and get your people leaders on board, make it really practical. So again, what holds us back often is culture feels nebulous. But I think what our research has proven is that there are specific mindsets and behaviors that we've proven with the research actually make a difference. And being very clear on what those behaviors are and how they can show up in the day-to-day work and jobs of our leaders can go a long way in making this feel tangible and therefore embraced by the organization as well. So really there's a path forward that we've been able to outline very clearly now.
So this has been a great discussion, folks. We started by asking the fundamental question, how can you build a culture of innovation that drives sustained growth? That was the question. And the simple answer is that companies can create a sustained culture of innovation by getting the innovation value flywheel in motion. This is a virtuous cycle of innovation structures, mindsets, behaviors that work together to hardwire the organization for innovation. And working in unison, together they fuel an innovation culture. And this culture, in turn, helps companies realize a robust return on their innovation investments, develop effective new ways of working, and drive growth and scale that enable strong financial performance. And how would you go about doing it? Tom, I loved what you said. Make sure you have the right innovation measurement and reward. How do you measure? How do you reward? And then in our research, we also talk about very specific actions, 6 specific actions that leaders can take. Start from the top, address the frozen middle, make it simple and practical, leverage experimentation, create envy, and reinforce the mindsets. So with that, folks, I'd like to say a big thank you to Tom and Sumita for this lively discussion, great research, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.